place in driving new markets, new revenue streams to sustain and build our arts. And with that, we have two magnificent speakers today who are here to talk about how they have innovated in their spaces and their story. Unfortunately, our third speaker, Mr. Avinash Kumar, who was scheduled to come from Goa, due to the coronavirus outbreak and scare, he was unable to fly last night and come to Chennai. Well, this is possibly one of our futures where we will not be able to travel as much as we would like due to, external factors. But that said, we have two magnificent women here today to tell their stories, and I would like to just briefly introduce them. Ms. Anita Ratnam is the best described as an intersectionalist who has worked weaving many disciplines of dance, theatre, spoken word, ritual, dramaturgy, and women's issues. Her formal training in Bharatanatyam, Mohiniyattam, Kathakali has given Dr. Ratnam a distinctive movement vocabulary that she has named Neo-Bharatanatyam. Ms. Geeta Wolf started Tara Books as an independent publishing house based in India, an original and creative voice in contemporary Indian publishing. She is known for her interest in exploring and experimenting with the form of the book. She has written over 20 books for children and adults, several who have won many international and national awards, and has been translated into many, many languages. Now may I request to come on stage and please give them a round of applause, Dr. Anita Ratnam and Ms. Geeta Wolf.
Namaskaram, good morning. If your house was on fire, what would be the two things you would grab before running to safety? Most of us will think of an actual object. But how about the spirit of innovation and the ability to inspire? What if we can protect that in times of great stress or crisis? Because our topic is culture as innovation, if you Google and find out what are innovative processes for Forbes 500 companies, I speak especially to dancers, they'll tell you about the many P's: product, process, policy, profit. The fourth word is not what most dancers in India look at. But we do have product, process, policies. But here, Geeta Wolf and I, we come from two different streams of the arts. I don't know if we want to have such a broad term like culture, because culture can also involve food and the way we live and our habits. Maybe we can narrow it down to the written word, the visual arts, and the performing arts. What we will both do is we both have presentations, which are about 10 minutes long, after which we will have a brief discussion between ourselves. And then, because we don't have a third speaker, we are going to take questions from the audience. Before I begin, I just want to talk about the very fact that we live in a space that is a product of innovation. At a time that it was created, or even when the seed was germinated, Kalakshetra itself was an ideal. Its creator, founder, was an innovator in her own right. She married somebody much older than her. She already recognized that she had to find ways in which she had to harness other systems to be able to teach men and women Bharatanatyam, to create a style that was more or less androgynous. She also accessed her experience in Russian ballet. She used many of the moments in her own creative journey. And so if we now think of Kalakshetra as a citadel of tradition, or we have a style or a Barney that's already fit into a neat box. Just go back to the time of the incredible energy there must have been when this ground was cleared and Kalakshetra was beginning to form. The strands of organic farming and textiles and education and movement and music have been quite incredible. I will just make one more point before I start my presentation. For all of us who recognize that Chandralekha is in many ways a pioneer of 20th century postmodern Indian dance technique, it could not have happened without Rukmini Devi's support. There was a day she came to Kalakshetra and asked Rukmini Devi for dancers because she wanted bodies on whom to place and mold her vision. That very evening, 12 dancers were sent. Kalakshetra Bharatanatyam dancers were sent from here to Chandralekha's space, and those were the dancers with whom she mounted that Tillana at the East-West Conference in Bombay, which right now is in the history books as a turning point of modern dance. Before, of course, there was Uday Shankar. So it's really important for us to remember when we talk about tradition, a topic that Geeta and I will also talk about when we finish our presentations, that there is a point in which tradition and modernity, especially in a country like India, continue to be quilted and braided. It's not this or that. So I'm just going to have my presentation play, and I would like to talk over it because of the light. I've just assembled clips from some of the works I've done over the last 30 years, and I've called my style, you can just play it, called my style Neo-Bharatam, like a scaffolding on Bharatanatyam and my other visual, kinetic vocabularies that I have created work on. The most important note I have kept for myself is make every movement your own. So can we have the presentation, please? Images from 1993 to 2019, almost 30 years. So in the video clips, I'll just talk over them so that we don't end up just watching. The biggest challenge you young people have is how to deal with technology in India, as for something as simple as a PowerPoint presentation. So we can just bring the sound down a bit so I can talk about this. This was a section from Matrika, and I'm wearing actually a mask on my forehead inspired by the Nepali Kaumaris. You know, so this is actually a retelling of the goddess myth. This was construction and choreography, a work called Movements Monuments, where it's not me, just other 5 other dancers have been part of this. So we looked at shapes: round, square, long, curvy, spiral. The goddess Saraswati was one of 3 wives of Vishnu, and she was very unhappy with her situation. Why should I accept this nonsense, she said. What about my identity, my freedom? Why? The minute she asked the question, lightning flashed like a streak across the dark skies of the heavens. And Saraswati was cursed to become a river. And that is how the goddess became rivers, and the descent began from the heavens to the earth. One question why, and Saraswati tipped the balance. Takka dimmi takka jannu, takka dimmi takka jannu, takka dimmi takka jannu, takka dimmi takka jannu, takka dimmi. A book that inspired a production called Daughters of the Ocean, where personal diary was harnessed, like personal diary is my own life, and to tell the larger stories of the goddesses. This was improvisational. All this is about 25 years ago. Just about the blooming of a lotus. Remember, this is all before the age of internet and sharing. Some of you may recognize Joy. This is also from Matrika, about how we have glamorized the dancer, Tamil cinema actress, and the fashion model. Who do we worship today? That was created 12 years ago. This was a work called Vaitarani, also done about 25 years ago, on the journey of the soul after it leaves the physical body. It drew from the Vedantic idea of the soul that struggles to leave its earthly connections. Just using Tai Chi as a movement motive for a work on the lotus in China, the white lotus. All the group work is set on Bharatanatyam dancers, mostly from Kalakshetra alumni.
Goda now enters the heart of bhakti.
So
she dispenses with all ceremony.
A retelling of Andal.
Speaks directly to the conch held in Krishna's left hand. Karpuram narumo, kamalapu narumo.
I become the voice
Tell
of
me,
Andal.
white conch, how do my Krishna's lips taste? Like camphor or the nectar of lotus? Karpuram narumo, kamalapu narumo. Tiruppavalach sevvaidan தித்தித்திருக்குமோ மறுப்பொசித்த மாதவந்தன் வாய் சுவையும் நாற்றமும் விருப்புற்று கேட்கின்றேன் சொல்லாழிவெண் சங்கே சொல்லாழிவெண் சங்கே
Durga of Tibet, a goddess a goddess who contains all of our Indian goddesses in one. And this is a section from Seven Graces in which she is the red Tara, ready to defend her children. It's taken from Drunken Tai Chi. Gracefully ascends the steps of the well, and Ravana, delighted, takes his queen back to Lanka. The storytelling format that I use. That the queen of Lanka was once a frog. But my right hand has a long green glove. The sound of stone cutters and a shape that is struggling from within and wanting to emerge. A work called Stone, inspired by the myth of Ahalya and Medusa. So that's just, so if I'm here on a panel for something as important as culture and innovation as Geeta is for her writing, there are two other, I just showed you some of the performative aspects of what I have done in the last 30 years, before which I was a classical Bharatanatyam dancer. But there are, but I think one of the innovations that has created a greater impact is my dance portal, www.nartaki.com, which was actually started from a very simple need of a phone book. And an American television producer in 1991 calling me in New York and saying, we're going to interview your Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi. It was early in 1991. And we want to do some soft stories, and we want to know how to contact Yamini Krishnamurthy. So neither the embassy in Washington, D.C., nor the consulate in New York had any contact number for one of our greatest artists. So I had to put in a phone call to a friend. At that time, you had to book a trunk call and get Yamini's phone number, which I did not have readily. And that got me thinking about, why don't we have access to our greatest dancers and our wonderful teachers? When I went to India later that year, I did go to the Sangeet Natak Academy and the ICCR and to the culture bodies and asked them, I want to do this phone book. And they said, please don't do it. We're going to do it in 6 months. That was 28 years ago. So from one book to a second edition and online, it has grown. And I think the other initiatives that I have done in collaboration with many wonderful people is the festivals, the conferences, the mentoring. So I think the work in culture and in dance, in the arts, starts from an embodied experience of that single human figure. And if we think of the word innovation, we've got to understand that our human bodies have been this way, even though our lifestyle would have changed, our food may have changed, the world around has changed. But our ancestors are from 5-10 generations ago did not have kombu and did not have 4 legs. I mean, this is our anatomy. So our anatomy in a sense has not changed. Maybe we are taller, fatter, less healthy. But look at the world around the idea of dance and how much it has changed. How we share dance, how we talk about dance, how we learn about dance. So I'm going to leave you with just that thought because it all leads to the idea of technology. And I'm going to now request Geeta to make her presentation. Geeta Wolf.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Really happy to to be here. We're practically neighbors. Tara Books. Can you put the first slide on? Some of you may know us. Some of you may have visited our book building, which is literally just down the road here in Thiruvanmayur. Yeah. Okay, so in keeping with, I just want to make 4 points in keeping with what we've been asked to talk about, and that is innovation. And with books, innovation really has to do with the physical book and what we would call virtual books, e-books, other things. So what is the place of the physical book in the technology age is the question. And I would say that none of us can be actually against technology in that sense. So we do have books that combine mediums. For example, I can't show you too many, but things that combine music and the books, or how to enlarge the experience of the book. But I think the book as a 500-year-old form, and that is what we call tradition in the book world, it is quite enduring. And what we would like to do is, in a sense, bring the senses back to the book, the sense of touch, the sense of feel, the sense of color, especially for children. And speaking, about 15 years ago, there was anxiety among publishers that, is the physical book going to survive now that so many people read on the phone or read in Kindle? Interestingly, that seems to have peaked. There is, especially children's books are an area which has grown a lot, and people are seeing, the act of turning pages, the thing of holding a book, of telling stories. There is a certain value to that, which I think a more faceless kind of virtual thing doesn't duplicate in some way. So I just want to very briefly go through, for those of you who don't know us, our ethos. This year, can this be enlarged? If not, leave it. So, yeah. So this is book building, very close by. So you can see the art on the walls. They are by Meena women of Rajasthan, and it's going to bring me to the point. Next slide, please. This is our team, and one of the things I would like to say about publishing or any of the arts, it's very collaborative. It's not me that makes the books, it's a whole lot of people. There are designers, there are illustrators, there are printers. It's a very collaborative process of how books are made. So this is our team. Basically, we make illustrated books, which means books which have pictures for children as well as for adults. People usually think that picture books are something that only children can enjoy, but if you look at the history of the book, there are a lot of illustrated books. Dickens was illustrated very famously, as we all know. And we have many Indian traditions of the book, the scroll form, the Jain book form, many forms of the book which were essentially illustrated, and people used to tell stories. So, yeah, just go on. So these are some of the topics that we cover, and these are some of the books that we have on this range. As you can see, it's very mixed. So there is a lot. Visual languages, I would say, can take many, many forms. It's just not one style. So these are some of the books. Come down. Okay, I think in this context, this is quite important to emphasize that we are possibly the first publisher to have worked extensively with many of our folk and tribal art traditions. Goes back a long way, 25 years, bringing them into the form of the book. As you know, Many of these traditions, they paint on the floor, they paint on the walls. They also have paintings that you might have seen in craft fairs or in, various places where you see paintings. But for them to make a book is a very special thing, because what does a book do? A book gives a point of view, a perspective, a story. It's not like just seeing a painting on the wall. When you read a book created by one of these people, your perspective changes. You see the world from the point of view of that person. So that's particularly important, especially for children, because it is one way to break the homogeneity that the virtual world creates. As we all know, with its many good points, everything is appearing the same. So how do you bring what we would call, the death of so many species? How do you bring back variety? How do you bring back a multitude of perspectives? It is by introducing people to books who may not have ever done it before. And the most poignant thing is, many of them are not literate. So you see, the stories are oral, and we have to bring those stories into the form of the book from how they tell us. But their expression, imagination, sophistication is through painting. That is how they tell the story, not writing. So I'll just show you just a few slides to see. So this is, we are working here with many of the artists. Often this process involves a few months of work with them. Yeah. And these are some examples. I've also brought a few with me if anyone would like to see later, but there's perhaps a few that I would like to draw attention to, where we've been inspired by, many of you may have, by the different forms of the book, may have seen scroll paintings by Patuas from Bengal, where people unroll and sing songs. So here is a way to be inspired by a scroll, you see, to create a book for children on a village. It's called A Village is a Busy Place. This is a way of turning a very Indian form of storytelling into a scroll. And these are Where Has the Tiger Gone? These are the Gond stories, Gond myths, water. So you see, there is a lot to learn even in the environmental sense from people who live very closely with their environments. See, for us, living in the urban world, or for children living in the urban world, this is a very important way of bringing it, telling the story from this point of view. So these are some of the books that I have, not all. Okay. The next innovation that I would like to, I showed you one. Now, many of us, yes, thank you. Many of us, I've also spoken of the book form as being 500 years old. It is. So this form of the book, just one second, Ethan. This form of the book, where you have a cover and you have pages bound together like this. These are more familiar. This is old. It's a very good form. It's a very compact, very enduring thing. But one of the innovations that we have made is, how do you open the book? How do you change the form of the book? How do you read not only the text but the visuals through changing the book form? And I'll show you two examples. This is a very local book. It is actually our Eliot speech. See, it's called An Indian Beach. It's a French artist who came. So it's tracing the beach from morning, afternoon, night, keeps going. So the day repeats, so the book is never ending. You can see. In the middle is the sea. See? So children, I mean, this has been very, very successful, though it's extremely local. As a book so far, and there are many, thank you so much, many activities that you can do. That's another one children's book. And I want to show you another,
Let me get this.
Hold on, of, this has to be seen, hold on, of how when you change the form, the way you read it, the way you make sense, even very small babies can get something out of it. This is a wordless book, and I'm going to show you how the form of the book unfolds. So there is this game where toddlers play where you hide your face and you show it again. This is a form. This is when it unfolds, there's something behind it. Even a very small child will be able to make sense. Fold, unfold, repeat. So the form of the book, and we have many more like this, and I've just brought a few examples. One more I'd like to show you it's called Visit the Bhil Carnival. The Bhils are a tribe and indigenous people in central India, and they have this wonderful fair in this place called Jagotia. And this is Visit the Bhil Carnival, which opens like that. So you see, this is a wheel, and this here, this is a map. And this is a story. So it allows you to travel into this place by tracing your way through it. And this is a fold out or a pop-up. So these are ways in which, thank you, we have innovated even within the book form, so that when you read it, when you unfold it, when you do this, you get a different sense of it. And there is a delight in going back to it again and again. Yeah, that's the book that we saw. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to show you, so I have some of these books here, so later on if anyone wants to come and have a look, please do. The last thing I want to show you is, I don't know how many of you know about book printing, but most books are printed in an offset press where, thousands of copies come out. We have specialized using our skills, our local skills, what we can do, our local innovation, to make handmade books, which is books that are done on recycled paper, screen printed and bound by hand. Why do we do that? One, as I said, it's for local. The second is to, if you feel some of these books, you can see the difference between how, the ink is on the paper. It's almost like an original. It's almost like seeing an original or a print. As I said, to come back to it, to restore the senses, to feel the paper, to feel the ink, to feel all this. And this is our handmade book. So these books, some of you who in the book business might know there are something called artist books. So there are artists who make maybe 100 copies of a handmade book. They number them. This is copy 1 of 100 and so on. What we do is we made affordable artist books. So these are still numbered, but we have a team of bookmakers in Perungudi here to make affordable artist books. And I want to show you, I think this is the last thing that I will present, sort of a 7-8 minute film of, so these are all our handmade books. Come down again. I'll show you a short film on the process of creating something by hand. And in India, we are known for our handmade products. But I think what we also suffer from is a lack of creative design inputs, which actually raise the quality of what we produce, the value of what we produce, to a point where it becomes very desirable. And I think that is the only way forward for our craftspeople, is to have these inputs, which would actually put them really on the world stage. We've got lots of talent and lots of creativity there. So let me just show you this one experiment that we have done. Yeah, so I've sort of concentrated on innovations in different senses for the book form, and with technology, as I said, I mean, it's not something to be feared, but it's something to know its limitations. I think that's what we need to do. Some things it can do well, some things it cannot. It simply cannot take over all our senses as human beings. So I think that's really the problem. This little thing cannot substitute for everything that we can do. So in terms of innovation, this is what I would say. And I agree with Anita about tradition, because we have this feeling that, when you spoke about Kalakshetra, how old the tradition really is, we have a very romantic idea of tradition as being somewhere in the past where people did. It's nothing fixed like that. It's a way of doing something which has endured over time for good reasons. Some things about it are worth keeping and passing on, good to lose. Some things we perhaps may want to rethink the way it is. And that's the way tradition moves forward, I think. And most people who innovate tend to be a little bit ahead of their times, in the sense you may not be completely understood, or everyone may not flock to either see you or but it takes a while, but it's slow. It's slow and it's organic as a growth. Things happen in small excrements, and things which are good and enduring last, and that makes the new tradition. This is what I would say, yeah.
Thank you, Geeta, for the most beautiful presentation. I know the audience has loved it. I just wanted to say, as a dancer and to all dancers, we're in a dance institution, that we, the dancer, we are the book. On us is inscribed the text and the stories, and we collaborate with color and with our sets and our costumes and our light. And so ours is also an intensely collaborative process. And that is something that we all acknowledge as dancers. The only thing is, unlike a book, we don't have a finished product outside of our body that we can take and say, here, look. The only thing we can take outside of our body is a pen drive to say, look. And which brings me to the idea of technology. Because today, when any festival director around the world, if they want to find out about an artist, they first go to their website. They don't want to make the journey to come and see the artist in his or her geographical area. They want to see what the artist has said through the medium of technology. Either you send a link, or you always have to send that link, or you have to send a video clip. And a young dancer told me that there are too many of us, too few opportunities, so the only way we can show our dance is through the 3-minute clip now. So let's talk about technology. You have just briefly said that we need technology, but with the amount of e-books, and I know I'm also guilty when I've downloaded several, so when I travel I can actually read them. Your books are also like visual art, because you have engaged so deeply with tradition and design. So are we talking of like a niche market?
Niche in the sense that it's a very human need. Yes, in certain senses, yes. But there is also, as I said, in children's books particularly, there is a huge growth in the market, because it is not only the book itself, but the act of reading together with the child, sharing, looking at, going back, looking at the pages. Picture books, photography, visual books in general, I don't think there is much of a, those books still exist and are thriving. And I also read on the pad. There are some books, there are novels. There is something you might want to read during travel. You don't want to carry so many books. So I think it's got its place. I also think it has its place in terms of say it's an encyclopedia or you have various levels. I mean, you can really work creatively with exploring a certain thing. I mean, you want to know more, you click more, you want to know less, and so on. And I think encyclopedias really are on their way out because this thing does it much better. So I think the question we should be asking is this form suited to what we are trying to say? And not, it's the only thing that's available. I think that's the problem. I mean, there's no harm in any of it, except that it's also strongly addictive. And it also deprives us of a lot of time where we could be doing other things and honing other senses. So it's really one-sided in that way, and that's the problem.
Well, I think that your books automatically, for a dancer, I would say, they make great fodder for storytelling through gesture and a performative avatar of the book. And not in India, but I know that in so many countries, there is a growing space for afternoon storytellings of parents with their children and grandparents
Here too.
with their children. So urban societies are really looking for ways in which to take their children away from technology or away from the iPad and to have that human experience.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is technology is not the enemy in that sense, but it's just, we should just recognize its limitations. That's very hard because we think it can do everything. It claims to do everything, right? Yes. And to find time and to find the will to do, I mean, a live performance is a live performance. It's a one-time thing. And I think that even if we see slides of your work from earlier, it doesn't capture really having been there. And somehow there has to be a value to experiences that cannot be endlessly repeated. The value to the one-time thing. I saw this and I remember it. I heard so-and-so sing so many years ago. I've never heard anything like it. Sure, we have recordings, we can bring the memory back, but the entire experience. So I think with the performing arts, it's the experience.
Yeah. So I just want to end before we take our questions. These are all the questions. Are they for both of us? You haven't indicated to whom. And I just want to say that, yeah, I can read them out, but okay. I just want to say that now, especially with festivals around the globe, performing arts festivals, the more successful events are the ones that have an enormous amount of technology invested in them. It could be, to the point of view of spectacle, like amazing lighting, a huge orchestra, or acrobatics in the air, very much like Cirque du Soleil, or the almost impossible physicality of rap dance that has now become mainstream art. So it's I'm just putting it out there as the shows that get booked, which adhere more to spectacle and in a space where the solo dancer is nurtured, like in Kalakshetra. I don't know if that is going to be valued and cherished as one performer distilling his or her experience of a learned tradition and then taking it forward. So, okay,
yeah,
let's have questions.
It's how do we innovate without strong funding sources? Yeah, I would say playfulness, exploration doesn't really need funding. It's only when you want to create something with a very specific, and I also feel that if something has a very specific focus, you stop exploring. So the very thing of exploration is there's no end in sight. So you don't really need that, in my opinion.
How does Tara Books decide on art and artists? That is, how do you choose which artist to work with?
Yeah, through different ways. Some come to us, some are recommended. We just look at how, if we like the work, if we see potential in it, and then decide. It's also a slightly collective decision, so we'd pass it around and see what other people feel, what's the scope of it, and so on. So this is the latest book, our latest finding of artists, and we found them oddly enough on Instagram. So I want to show this to you. Extraordinary Warli artists who are also very, very modern, but living in their village and painting, who have an Instagram account. So this is a thing of you know, nothing is out of bounds really.
Yes.
And so we just collaborated on this book with them.
I think this we can both answer. Do you think that there are some innate qualities to innovation that lend themselves to such transformation? What are the innate qualities of an innovator?
I would say curiosity is one quality.
And you said playfulness. Yeah.
Risk taking, I would say, definitely, like no end in sight. What else would you say? Willing to push the boundaries of something. And I think also readiness to fail is one thing, because I think it's only when something doesn't go right,
I think
you
you're
shouldn't
right.
just, yeah.
We don't value failure as much.
Yes. It's very important. Then when something doesn't go right, then you should ask yourself why, and get back on course. So I think these are some of the qualities I would associate. Anita, you might other.
No, I agree. I think playfulness, curiosity, I think those, if we look back in history, we look at who are the innovators or the pioneers, they could have been dissatisfied with something. They could have been unhappy and said they have to find a new way to do something. And I think we're here in a collaborative event with Dakshina Chitra. So we have Debbie here, that the site of Dakshina Chitra itself was, to me, a really innovative idea, is to bring the cultural traditions and physical structures of South India into one place, that people in North India want to have one, but they still haven't been able to do. And what VR Devika has done for 30 plus years, working with folk artists and bringing them from the crevices of their own very humble origins and villages into the cities. It was because of Devika's, I saw the Tapatam artists one day at Lalit Kala Academy 30 years ago, and I decided to work with Tanjay Rangarajan at that point.
Devika also introduced some of our very early artists to us. So yes,
I think,
sure.
If we can just go back a bit to tradition, I think what we find now, which is very wonderful, is that our artists who are tribal and folk artists, whether it's through your books or whether it's through their own performing art traditions, there is a spotlight on them. Maybe for some artists it's a bit too late because their lineage has almost died out, many of the instrument makers and instrumentalists. But I think the conversation that we need to have with them is very important. So, yeah, the next question is, do we create for a specific market, or do we just pursue our dreams?
Well, somewhere in between, I would say, if you want to be successful, because when we create something, it's really fundamentally for ourselves. It's not, at least that's the way we work. But then having done that, you should ask yourself if it communicates. Because only communicating to you, then a lot of people will not get it, simply. So, I mean, you have to satisfy yourself or your group. The other thing is, the individual creator is something that I'm still not completely convinced about, because I think that you need corrective visions also. Like you should probably pass it on to a few other people and say, what do you think? Because you're really behind what you do and you don't see the problems in it. So I think a well-meant criticism is the best gift that you can get. Somebody who really means well by you and gives you the kind of solid criticism you need is rare, and is something that will really help.
So here's a question for me specifically. It says, when you move to the contemporary dance space, how do you define the grammar and form, and how does that grammar evolve? The grammar is what you have learned, because I learned Bharatanatyam here, first with Adiyar K. Lakshman, who was from here, and then continued my studies here in Kalakshetra. So there is what I call a muscle memory of a certain kinetic imprint So, which is a Kalakshetra style of movement. But Lakshman sir had already changed it a bit because he was teaching mostly young girls one-on-one as opposed to a class in Kalakshetra. So he was already adapting it. And then because I found that Bharatanatyam for me was not expressive enough kinetically, I moved to Mohiniyattam and then also learned Kathakali for facial mobility and more an amplification of certain, a more theatrical style. So I would say that Bharatanatyam mainly, and I would say the Mohiniyattam and Kathakali were the initial scaffolding on which I began to work. So how do I define a grammar? Right now, it's changed very, very much over the years. I used to say, no, this works, this I can say in the Bharatanatyam language, or this I can bring Mohiniyattam into it. But now when I revisit a work, it's more about how do I wish to move? Because so many vocabularies, including a lifetime of yoga, therapeutic yoga, as well as working a little bit in martial arts and a lot in Tai Chi, which is just silent with your breath, has slowed down my pace. So I'm able to do movement in extreme slowness, which is actually very difficult, but it now comes to me organically. So it looks like the movement is mine, which then means I can't really teach an item to anybody. I can only talk about the process to a student. I can talk about how I've arrived at this kind of movement vocabulary, and I leave 20% of every performance for improvisation for myself, because most of the time I work in recorded music, so I know the music very well. So within that, I can play, in a sense. I can play, keeping a certain sthai bhava in mind. So I hope that answers most of it, or partially that. Those are sort of the questions that we received. Anything?
There's one here
Yes,
which
go
is
ahead.
quite important, which I think we should very briefly answer, which is, do you think there are some this one. What is your opinion on the appropriation of an art form in the name of innovation? I think this is a very important question,
Yes.
especially when folk and tribal artists are concerned. It's a very, very important question. I think by naming them, by saying who's who, by giving them the status of a co-creator, is how you really stop that. Because basically when you look at the power relations, you can just take a piece of work and pass it off as something else and put it in. A lot of this kind of thing is going on. So I think the way to do that is to have, at least we do, you have contracts with them, you know who they are, you've got a biodata. That is the thing that will help, that will get back to them and help them in their own other careers, whatever else they do, because many of our artists then show those books around, they get royalties. So this is how we think it is. But this appropriation, wherever there is this unequal power relations, this is going to happen, because they don't have a way of really speaking up or going to court or whatever it is that we can do to protect our copyrights. And one very brief small thing is that the issue is a little complex also, because with some of these traditions, they never used to be an individual creator. It used to be a community art form. So innately there is a thing of people were not named. You come and add to somebody else's work, or that's how it was back in the day. But things have changed even there. There are individual artists. So we tend to think that it's all there for the taking, which it isn't. Within the community is something different. Often you don't find anybody signing their work or whatever it is, and people build on other people's work. So I think out of this complex situation, something new is coming out, and as people in the arts in this way, we can do what we should be doing. I mean, more than that is hard to say. Yeah.
That's true, Geeta. I think I want to just close also on to answer the same question. I think that when we studied in Kalakshetra or from Kalakshetra students, I think we know that there was a system that Rukmini Devi created that was an amalgam of all the traditional teachers that she met and she interacted with, and many of them were invited and they stayed and composed and choreographed here in Kalakshetra. But one amazing innovation she made was when her guru refused to do Nattuvangam for her, and she said, I'm going to put a woman there to do Nattuvangam. And so Kamala Rani teacher was among the early people to sit there and actually do Nattuvangam for a Bharatanatyam dancer. It came out of a need to say, so I think now, and I just want to take an example of Australia where I just met. There is every time they have any function, including a political function, they say we acknowledge that we stand on stolen land of the First Nation people, because it really is stolen land, and that we honor their ancestors. And they have, it's like a typed ready to read note. And I think maybe for all of us dancers, when we tie our shalangai and we put on our talesaman and we stand in Samapadam, maybe we can silently acknowledge those artists because of whom we have been able to learn this form. When I studied in Kalakshetra, there was no access to, say, dance history. We were not taught much theory. But I think now in the last 15 years, there's been so much more new writing and new awareness and new knowledge that all of you young people, especially, I hope, can get aware of what is the form that you are learning and doing and hope to keep for the rest of your lives. I think that that moment of acknowledgement is very important. And she talks about naming, and I think giving credit to everybody who has collaborated, either on our printed program notes or on our website or during a performance, is very, very important. So I think that because we're on stage because of an enormously collaborative network of people who have made it possible for us to put that foot on stage. And I think that acknowledgement should at least bring to light the various people who, as Geeta says, may not have the power to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and Ms. Geeta and Ms. Anita, thank you so much for that very, very fascinating session. And I love the way I think we have ended that, looking at innovation and looking at the past and the present and the future at the same time. May I please request Kalakshetra's beloved director, Ms. Revati Ramachandran, to please come on stage to honor the artists.